How important is it to have creative freedom?
Look, uninhibited creative freedom is something that I've been incredibly fortunate to have for the better part of my entire television career. Unlike anyone else I know of in television, I've been free to do whatever I want, to make the shows I want, anywhere I want, with whom I want, in any style I want. So at first, I don't know any other way, and by now, I won't have it any other way. Life is good. Why settle for less? And by the same token, when you're given that much freedom and you have essentially no interference and nothing but support behind you, what you don't want to do is get lazy and bored and sloppy. To me, I'd much rather not make TV at all, or make even unsuccessful TV, than make competent television. You know, it's very easy to make a conventional travel or food show at this point. It's like shooting porn. It's the same shot sequence and the same sort of limited terminology. You know how all of the little pieces work, where you have to start and where you have to end. I detest competent, workmanlike storytelling, and I'm always very, the times that we do that, I'm very unhappy with that. I'd rather fail.
So is that why no one's been able to replicate your formula? Obviously, a lot of people have tried.
Look, to be perfectly honest, most of the people I met who've been in the television industry for a long time, their greatest fear is that they will not be in the television industry next year. That they'll say something or do something or make a decision that will be so unpopular that they will lose their gig and won't end up back on television again. I don't have that fear. While I admit I wouldn't particularly enjoy going back to cooking short order, I know I can. If I have to, I'm pretty sure I could keep up on an omelet station.
So what have you learned from all your travels? What do you take away from this? What do you take away?
Be open to experience, be willing to try new things, don't have a rigid plan, accept random acts of hospitality without judgment or fear. Don't be afraid to wander, don't be afraid to eat a bad meal. If you don't risk the bad meal, you'll never get the magical one. But I think most important, be humble, be grateful. Be aware of the fact that you are probably the stupidest person in the room. As far as you are the least prepared, least equipped person to know who's really in charge and what's really going on.
What have you learned about people from around the world? What observations do you have? Are there any sweeping
I think maybe before I started traveling, I thought that the human race as a whole were, could and would turn on itself at any moment, venal, petty, cruel, arbitrary. And it's true that all of those things exist in this world, but I meet mostly pretty nice people doing the best they can, often under very, very difficult conditions. I met a lot of very nice people who've done very, very bad things that conflict with my deeply held conceptions of justice or sexual equality or acceptable practice or religious views. A lot of gray areas in travel. But I think that on balance, the world is filled with people doing the best they can, who love their kids and, would like to, put on a clean shirt every morning and live their lives with a little dignity and have access to food and water, hope, just like everybody else.
So I'm going to switch gears a little. So have you ever been fired from a job, and how did you react? And then
No, I've been fired many times. In my cooking career, I've been fired a number of times. I was not a particularly good chef. I had a lot of problems at various points in my career with narcotics. I was very deservedly fired on a number of occasions. But I mean, if you're talking about failure, I accepted failure as a chef because I was at various times a bad chef and even a bad person. These days, if I fail, it's because I tried to do something and did not succeed, or I just was not able to do what I hoped to do or wanted to do. Or maybe I tried to do something that just clearly in retrospect didn't work, but I would much rather that. I would much rather fail gloriously than not venture, not try. I'm not as I said before, I'm not interested in competent, telling stories with competence. I'm looking to tell them with some style and originality and some creativity that is interesting to me and the people I work with. And there have been times that has resulted in failure, meaning it didn't work, it didn't communicate anything like what I wanted to. Often the story I think I'm going to get ends up being another story entirely that's even better or very different. That's good. But there are other times where I just fail miserably. I tried to do a Sicily show again, and it was not good. It did not capture the place. It didn't show us anything of value. It did not live up to the subtlety and beauty of its subject, including powerful women storytellers, for instance. That is something in which the show has lacked frequently. It's something that we consciously try to do better at, but it's also something that we fail at. If you see a show that's all men talking, that's not a tendency or a predilection on my part. It's a failure. It means for whatever reason we failed to find or convince women in a particular country, where often culturally that's difficult, but it's no excuse to open up to us. I think that's something we fail at probably more regularly, regrettably, than anything else. And then there are shows where some people are just going to hate it. They just don't like the style. They think it's self-indulgent. They don't get it. But that's the kind of failure I like. A powerful reaction, one way or the other, is infinitely preferable to me than pleasing everybody. If I walk in a room where everybody agrees with me, I find that frightening and dismaying and boring as fuck.
So if someone's in a dark place where they also have been fired, they're up against failure and they're looking to turn around their career, what's your advice to them?
Look, I think in a lot of ways, I think the answer to that question, my answer to that question stems from my history as an addict. A lot of other addicts looked in the mirror every day and did not see somebody worth saving. Even at my worst, there was a level of vanity, I guess. I looked in the mirror and saw somebody deep in there, regardless of how low I was, my circumstances. I had a high enough opinion of myself that I thought it's worth going forward. I think a lot of people in a similar situation, for whatever reason, look in the mirror and see somebody bad, unworthy of good things, and allow themselves or excuse a downward spiral because they don't really believe in their basic worth. I did, so that's vanity. I think it's the same drive that allows me to tell stories in books and on TV. Because let's face it, anybody who writes a book or goes on TV with the notion that they have a story worth telling that people might want to listen to, you're really already, by definition now, a sort of an aberrant personality and a monster of self-regard. This is a very unreasonable attitude. I have a story that you will want to listen to for 10 minutes. Why would any reasonable, and I might make a living doing that. Some of you might even want to pay for that story, to the point that I could make a living doing that rather than washing dishes or preparing meals. That's not normal. That takes something, and I don't know whether that's, that's often very much at odds with being a functioning, well-rounded, good person in the conventional sense. That kind of vanity, narcissism, self-regard, self-importance, and cheerful willingness to examine and share your feelings. I think Fran Lebowitz said at one point, if you're sharing your feelings, that's not sharing, that's leaking.
What do you consider was your big break? Who gave it to you? And how did you feel in that moment when it came together?
My big break came when a woman named Karen Rinaldi, who was an editor at Bloomsbury, USA, read an article that I had written I had two big breaks. One, I wrote a short piece intending it for a free paper in New York called the New York Press. And they intended to publish it, I was told, but they kept bumping it week after week after week. And in a moment of hubris, I listened to my mom's completely unreasonable suggestion that I send it to the New Yorker. New Yorker calls and says, we're running your story, we're buying your story. They ran it. That was a huge break for me because within 48 hours, an editor at Bloomsbury USA named Karen Rinaldi had read the article and commissioned me for the staggeringly high price of $50,000 to write a book. And when that book came out, it was immediately a bestseller, and it changed my life overnight. Overnight. I mean, I was desperately in debt, hadn't paid my rent in time ever, had owed Amex for 10 years without making a single payment, owed the IRS, hadn't even filed, was in very, very, very insecure place at age 44. And suddenly, people were offering me things and offering me opportunities. And I think if I was old enough and I fucked up enough already that I just said, I realized this is a lucky break, was unlikely to get another. So I made very careful choices in that environment, was very determined to not fuck up.
What were the careful choices you made?
I didn't go for easy money. I didn't grab the first thing. I did not give Food Network the show they wanted. And I said no a lot to what seemed like a lot of money.
So it's counterintuitive. So, obviously some sort of instinct is kicking in. On paper, none of that makes sense, right? So,
well, look, what's good for you in the short run is not necessarily good for you in the long run. You're starting out as a writer, you've written one book, and you got a TV show, and somebody offers you $1 million to, represent an anti-diarrhea medication. Well, that's a lot of money in the short run, but you're always going to be that guy with the shits.
that was awesome.
That's a life sentence. Hey, it's diarrhea guy.
Very well said.
Thanks.
Your team, I know you've got the team.
Yeah.
It's very tight. Right?
Very.
So how important is it, what do you look for in something that makes a team that works for you?
We're all movie fans. we're all people who understand that we're lucky, that the degree of freedom that we have to do what we want and shoot what we want. Everybody on my crew understands that if they have an idea, like I'd like to tell this story backwards, or I'd like to shoot this entire show, an entire episode on a cell phone, or black and white, or Panavision, or 16 millimeter film, let's make that happen. I will support that, and I work thankfully in an environment where the people around me will support that. So to the extent that it is possible for everybody to be creatively satisfied and try the things they always wanted to try, we're all in that together, you know. But you know, you have to have, you work with me, and most of the people I work with have worked with me for a very long time. I mean, some of the shooters on my show have been with me 15 years. Chris and Lydia, who own 0.0, the production company, they were my original camera people on my first show for Food Network. They used to walk backwards together on their honeymoon in front of me with these little Panasonic cameras through like minefields in Cambodia, just them. Still with them. I really never made television with anybody else. Gotta have a sense of humor, gotta love movies, gotta know your cinematographers, because if I start talking about Vittorio Storaro, you don't know who the fuck I'm talking about, we're gonna have a problem. Work hard. I don't have to give a pep talk. Everybody understands that we all expect of each other to do our best work every episode. To be different, to be more outrageous, to be different, and to be better. And the people who take that challenge seriously do well on my show and stick around. And the ones who turn in competent work do not. Because I abhor competent work.
Have you ever fired anyone?
Well, as a chef, yes, many, many times. Have I gone? I do not do the hire. I am not the person. I don't enjoy firing people, but I would not hesitate to do so. But I will go through the woman who is the executive producer of the entire series, is in charge of hiring and firing. I will not hesitate to go to her and sit down and say, Paulie, I don't want to see him no more. He needs a little ride out into the Meadowlands, this guy, this jerk off here is not going to work out, or this one's lazy, or I just don't like them. Like, there's just something creepy about them. They're not funny. They've got some annoying personal tick, but that's okay. But if it's just pedestrian, competent playbook stuff, everybody understands that that's not what we do. And after a few of those shows, you are either reassigned or take it out to the Meadowlands. Just get the shovel.
Okay, the last major question I have is,
we burn through people too. Look, it's hard. If you're on the road as much as these crews are, and working under conditions, weather conditions and law and order conditions and living conditions like they do, 12, 14, 15 hours a day, hauling equipment around, that wears on some people over time. Editors, really great, talented editors, sitting there looking at a screen of me shoving food in my face, for 6 years, under the kind of pressure we put on editors to show us something dazzling every time. People do burn out. They burn out. They very reasonably reach a point where they've had enough, and it starts to show in their work, and they might find themselves reassigned to one of our many other fine shows that the production company does. It's sort of a private joke. It's like, if you start screwing up on my show, I say, you like hunting? You like camping?
well, now they're all going to know what that means.
No, everybody knows.
It's
like, if I come to you and say, you like camping, hunting? It's like they understand I am displeased.
With food, are you a purist, Should cuisine stay how it's meant to be culturally or in its early form, or do you think innovation is a good thing, whether it's using technology, gastronomy, or whatever it is?
I'm admittedly, I have very contradictory impulses here. I'm old school in a lot of ways. I think you should at least know how to make a beef bourguignon correctly according to the original recipe. To the degree that anything can be authentic, you should know how to, some dishes, to me, like a cacio e pepe or traditional Italian pastas, I get really pissy if people riff on them. You put chicken in a carbonara, you lost me. It's unforgivable sin against God. But on the other hand, there are guys who came out of blues and R&B who turned out to be Jimi Hendrix. There are people who can riff on and improvise on classics and create whole new wonderful worlds. And what is authentic is mostly meaningless anyway. I mean, the tomato is not authentic Italian. I mean, it came from the New World. Chinese food is always evolving, so it's protective and instinctively hostile to new as I can be. I know too many really creative chefs, and I understand the changing world. Is it pleasurable, I guess, is the benchmark for me. If you're gonna mess with a classic, are you making something more dazzling that says, look at me and how smart I am? Or are you in some way improving it? Is it pleasurable? Is a chicken Caesar more pleasurable than a plain Caesar? I think not. I think the chicken takes away, but that's my opinion. Caesar salad, how authentic, how old school, that's not, it's a modern creation. The nacho, the Caesar salad, they're both, well, one is Mexican, the other isn't. The nacho ain't Mexican. So it's a question I wrestle with a lot on the show. By instinct, I'm old school, particularly when it comes to pasta and sushi. I don't think God wants you to put cream cheese on sushi or mayonnaise on sushi, ever. And there are a few food crimes that I just think a beer and a beaten is in order.
How do you juggle everything and stay organized and productive? You have a crazy schedule.
Yeah.
Any tips there for the different?
I'm a list maker. I'm relentlessly, pathologically punctual. I think that comes from all those years as a chef and more importantly as a cook. If you showed up late as a cook, you're letting your people down in a very tangible way. Somebody else has to physically do the work, do the setup, or you lose the shift, or you get fired. As a chef, cooks who showed up late, who were disorganized, who couldn't keep a lot of stuff going on in their heads, they failed. And when they failed, we all went down with them. So I am a relentlessly, possibly even unhealthily, anal retentive, obsessive compulsive, clean up after when I'm cooking, I'm cleaning up after myself constantly. I keep things organized. I write lists. I keep my schedule up to date. I am never late. And as part of that, if I say to you, I'm going to meet you tomorrow at, 12 minutes after 5 to see John Wick 7, I will be there at, 5:02, hanging out across the street, discreetly observing to see what time you show up. And I'll be making some very important decisions based on your arrival time.
So I'm glad you got here early. That's all I'm
It's a curse and a blessing. But I think everything important I ever learned, I learned as a dishwasher and as a cook. You show up on time. You organize. You stay organized. You clean up after yourself. You think about the people you work with. You respect the people you work with. And like I say, you do the best you can.